In India, there has been an efforts for reform movements since the Buddhistic period. We see a lot of reform movements that have gone, but Sri Aurobindo mentions that they were always very tolerant, they were not destructive. But after the British came, the reform movements have become more and more destructive. So they are destroying the forms, past forms. But in the past, the reform movements were not as destructive. And after the individualistic age, when we have destroyed the past forms, right? So there comes the subjective age. So since we have to re-seek the inner meaning of reality, life and reality, so there is a subjective search for that truth. So what is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of reality? We try to find it again, and that is when the subjective age is created. So any society moves from this symbolic to typal to convention, the age of conventions, to the individualistic age, and then to the subjective age. And we see that in India we have been struggling with this individualistic age as of now, and we are trying to enter the subjective age. Now, what kind of future does Sri Aurobindo see for the social aspect, right? From a national aspect, we know that the world is moving towards a world unity. But from a social side, what is it moving towards? Sri Aurobindo says that a subjective age may lead to a spiritual age, and spiritual age is what Sri Aurobindo sees as the culmination. But Sri Aurobindo warns us that a subjective age may stop very far short of spirituality, because subjective age is the first condition, not the thing in itself. And Sri Aurobindo also discusses how that progression from subjective to spiritual age may happen. He says that in the 19th century we had a lot of focus on materialism. So essentially we had the industrial revolution there, and the thought was that everything is matter. So everything arose from matter, so everything is a product of matter. But in the earlier 20th century, we see that a vitalistic tendency arose in the nations. So there was a hunger for resources to satisfy life instincts. So everything was thought of as coming from the life instinct. So everything was there to satisfy your life instinct. So this kind of thinking that was there in the 20th century, it led to the two destructive world wars that we saw. Then came the age of mental subjectivism. So essentially where we think of the mind as the source of everything. And there is an increasing tendency to rationalize our own life. We see that there is so much focus on increasing efficiency of all our life processes. We see that there is a hunt of hidden mind powers. So in the field of artificial intelligence, we are trying to map the human subconscious and trying to see how the hidden powers of humanity can be used. So this is the age of mental subjectivism. Sri Aurobindo says that a true spiritual age can only occur if in this age of mental subjectivism we turn away from the mind and towards the spirit. So essentially what we do is we think of mind as a secondary power and spirit as the original power, and only then there would be a starting of a spiritual age. Then only we can proceed towards a spiritual age. So this is how Sri Aurobindo sees the progress of this subjective age. So we have discussed about the political and social side, right? So how a nation is evolved and what kind of social progress we see. But now I would like to come to the story of Sri Aurobindo, which is the second section of the talk. So Sri Aurobindo came at a very significant time when from political aspect and from the social aspect, there were some tendencies which could have been very destructive. For example, on the political side, we see that the national units were emerging, and there were two specific threats. So first was the threat from the imperialist powers who were hampering the emergence of many nations. For example, the Britain was not allowing India to emerge, right, to its own spiritual heritage, to its own temperament. And similarly, the Asian nations were subject as a whole. So they needed some guidance on how to recover themselves, how to achieve their freedom. So Sri Aurobindo did that work in India as an example to the world. Then there was this national egoism that were rising all around the world. So nations in their own national search, they tried to think of the national ego as the eternal rather than the national soul. And we see that this kind of tendency led to World War I and World War II. So someone had to show that national soul is separate from the national ego and how to find that national soul. On the social side, most of humanity was moving towards an individualistic and subjective age. So someone had to show the way how we can move towards a spiritual age. And we saw what kind of destruction could happen if some kind of false subjectivism arose. For example, in Germany, we saw that the vital ego of the state was taken as the supreme under Nazi Germany, and what kind of destruction followed after that. So someone had to show how to move from this conventional age and individualistic age to the spiritual age. So Sri Aurobindo accomplished all of these work in his life. So Sri Aurobindo saw a nation as we earlier saw, as formed of a spiritual, mental, vital, and physical body, right? And if we look at his nationalist program, the fourfold nationalist program, Swaraj, national education, Swadeshi, and boycott. So this corresponds to these four bodies itself. So I'll tell you how. So Sri Aurobindo observed that India had declined in all these four components: the spiritual, mental, vital, and physical, during the conventional age. He knew that British and Islamic rule had contributed to the decline massively, and he understood that the political unity that British had formed, that could now be used to bring out the psychological aspect of that unity. And his action was guided based on these two principles.